Yes,
Yeah,
I think
we
we're
are
live.
live. Hello,
Yeah.
everyone on Facebook, and hi, Surabhi, and good evening to all of you. If you are watching the live, just drop a comment so we know you are able to see us. Otherwise, we'll just keep talking to ourselves, assuming we are live. Imagine that.
Yeah. And also, like, given that it's you and me talking, I think we have to just be mindful of time because we have a
Yeah,
tendency to talk for 2 hours more than what we have designated to talk. So that'll be
yeah,
helpful. Yeah.
yeah. It's good we are being watched by people. So if we start seeing people drop, we know, okay, fine. Yeah, we are done for
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah. And hopefully, someone in the comments will be like, hello, 1 hour over. Can y'all stop now? Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
or
stop.
I think one of our dogs will call out saying that Khana de do.
100%. 100%.
Yeah,
100%. As you can see, my door is partially ajar because I would not want either Lucci or Mutton to be like at the door barking or scratching. So I'm like, just please come in.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
can, I hope that people will start commenting and everything. Why
Yeah.
don't you tell something about yourself, Survi?
Oh dear. Wow. Okay. Okay. Hi everyone. I am Surabhi. I run a canine nutrition and behavior consulting practice called Lucci and Muttons. I am based out of Gurgaon in India, and I graduated from BHARCS. So I am a BHARCS certified consultant, much like Sowjanya and Anushri, who's another BHARCS consultant. And yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, and of course, I'm a pet parent to two dogs called Lucci and Mutton, which is why my practice is named as it is. And both of them are rescue dogs. And so Lucci was responsible for my journey with nutrition, and Mutton's been responsible for my journey with behavior. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about her today as well. But yeah, that's about myself. Sajanya, do you want to
Yeah,
talk about yourself?
you were definitely not prepared for that question, no?
No, I was like, oh, we're just gonna like deep dive into talking.
Yeah, I realized that you were not like up for that
Yeah.
question. Um, yeah, I'm Sowjanya and I run Dog Promise and I am a certified canine behavior consultant from Bucks and I am dog mom to two dogs, Sammy, who is not with us anymore, and Zoe. So I think, yeah, that's a very short, quick introduction about myself, I guess. So I think what Surbi and I wanted to talk about today with all of you who are here and listening in to us is about reactivity in dogs. And we will touch upon different conversations around reactivity and share some information as well with you along the way. Um, Before we get into everything, I wanted to ask you, why are you so passionate about talking about reactivity in
Oh, you're
dogs?
asking me or you're asking the general audience who's
I am
listening in?
asking you.
Okay, me. Okay. Uh, so, I mean, I've had a very like personal journey and I think learning curve with reactivity. So when we adopted Mutton about 3 years ago, she displayed a lot of reactive behaviors. And so, we were struggling with, barking at multiple different triggers. We were struggling with reactivity to other dogs. We were struggling with reactivity in outdoor environments. And I think, I want to take the opportunity to also like clarify what reactivity is, because again, a lot of the times I think people assume that reactivity means aggressive behaviors, but it's actually just a response that seems out of context, right? Or it's an exaggerated response in a specific situation that doesn't seem fitting to a particular situation. And that response could include growling, barking, snapping, those behaviors as well, but it's not always those behaviors, right? um, and so we struggled with a little bit of that in the beginning, and it was extremely hard for me because I think Lucci was a very very different dog as compared to when she had come home, and so this felt very new, this felt very different, it felt very challenging. I don't think it helped that early on in that journey, I think I also brought a lot of baggage to these reactive behaviors because of Mutton's breed, because she is a pit bull type dog. And so I feel like the two sort of latched on to each other, which was, which has been its own journey. So I feel like what has happened for me personally in the last 3 years has been to unlearn so much about reactivity, uh, what that means for our dogs, uh, how we can support our dogs through those behaviors. And I feel like that's been, again, I think Mutton's journey and my journey with her has been that kind of a learning space for me. So I feel like that's why I feel really passionate about it, because I feel like I've been there, I have done that, and I think I think it's a mix, right? I feel like both as a professional, I'm able to, I suppose, outline and guide other pet parents with what's the best way to address the behaviors and support the dog and themselves. But also, I feel like as a pet parent myself, I understand how overwhelming and challenging that journey can be. So I feel like it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew why you're so passionate about, reactivity. And I think with Mutton, she also carries the baggage of the breed misconceptions, right? Um, I also feel like, Sammy was a golden retriever, right? And so we always felt like golden retrievers are friendly dogs, right? Like, they're supposed to be friendly to, humans and other animals, dogs, anybody and everybody. That's the perception we're given about Goldens, right? And we brought in Zoe, and he was uncomfortable around her, and they would get into quite a bit of rough play, which then led to a lot of reactivity, and then he was not comfortable around people. He would not allow being touched and petted. It was actually quite confusing for us, because we're like, you know is there something wrong with my dog, right? Because you start wondering that, okay, the entire breed is supposed to look like this, but then my dog is like this. Is there something wrong with him, right? So I feel like that's the other thing that happens with dogs with reactivity, right? They probably carry the baggage of their respective breeds, while people don't look into their individual personality, but also their preferences, their likes and dislikes, their comfort zone, their discomforts and stuff like that, right? So I feel like that's also another reason why reactivity kind of gets misunderstood, I think, a little bit. But so you mentioned that, you had a little bit of baggage around the behaviors that come along with reactivity, right? I wonder, when you started as a dog parent to Mutton, were you exposed to a lot of, aversive methods of dealing with reactivity? Do you feel like a bulk of the suggestions being given about handling these behaviors were coming from aversive methods as we know today?
Yeah, I think for sure. I feel like, and again, right? I think there were so many layers, right? Because this was not just about reactive behaviors, but this was also about the breed, right? And I think the presumption that because you have a certain breed, the breed needs a certain kind of training, or the breed needs a certain kind of environment. I don't think the idea at that point was that it's not about the breed, it's about the individual dog. And, all dogs have the same needs, and it's not breed specific for most part. So I think that I got a lot of information, and I was subjected to a lot of messaging around breed specific training, which then was also messaged with this training is important, otherwise this breed will turn reactive and aggressive. So it was almost like when I was discussing some of these reactive behaviors, it was almost like, well, you're not doing the training, so that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. And absolutely, I think it was not just about like, and again, it's the definition of aversive, right? Like, what are we defining as aversive? Was there, was there messaging around using choke collars? Was there messaging around using shock collars? Sure, but aversive also in the sense of being punitive, aversive also being in the sense of withdrawing, right? But aversive also in the sense of correcting behaviors with scarcity, correcting behaviors with punishment, right? Those were also part of those aversive messages as well. And I just feel like it all sort of got bundled up together because, again, with Mutton in the beginning, she also showed resource guarding. And really intense resource guarding. I remember once very naively, I was sort of moving her around while she was chewing a bone, and I wanted to essentially just move the bone away from her to another spot, and she snapped, right? And when I did, and this was in the early days of her coming home, and when I did sort of reach out to, a few people for help, they said, if she snaps, then you just take the bone or you whack her, right? Till the time she doesn't learn that that's not okay. And that just didn't sit well with me at all because I was just like, this is not making sense. So I feel like 100%, I think all of that. And then, of course, I think, it's interesting that you found, like, I found both. I found a school of thought that recommended the aversive way, but then I also found a school of thought that talked about systematic desensitization, right? And the whole associating something negative with something positive. And I did try that because I thought, like, okay, this makes sense. Let's try that. But it's so interesting because I remember, like, there was a time we had a terrace that was open, so there were, the grills, you could see through the grills outside, and every time Mutton would go out, she would see certain kinds of men walking past, or she would see certain kinds of vehicles. She'd start barking excessively, and so, every time she would bark, like, I would try the whole treat thing, take the treat, scatter her, like, make all of these associations. And I remembered, like, two things happening when I tried that consistently for some time. One, I just feel like the whole experience was very, like, frenzied for me, right? Because she was worked up, I'm worked up, I'm trying to distract her, trying to, like, create those associations in those moments. But also, it was so interesting to me that she showed me that, buddy, like, when my cup is full, I don't really care about food. I don't really care about treats, right? Like, my cup is full and I need to react. And so for me, that didn't work at all as well. So I think a combination of the two for sure.
Right. Yeah. So a couple of things that you said, right? Like, aversives are not just, your choke collars or your shock collars. There is so much around aversives which are psychological that tend to get be brushed under the carpet because we don't entirely realize that they do fall under aversives. And the other thing that you spoke about is desensitization, right? I feel the biggest thing, and we are not here to really, pull around other methods and approaches, but what stood out for me in terms of desensitization, uh, Zoe was never obviously a reactive dog, but then she was completely uncomfortable in a crate, right? And we were always told, put her in a crate and give her something nice in the crate, and then, she'll start getting used to it, right? And she never got used to it. She absolutely hated it. She would whine her, head off, and scratch and bite the crate, and everything. And it kind of made me feel like, if the dog you're talking about is not up for processing this particular object or this trigger or the situation, there is nothing probably we can do in terms of, making them feel comfortable, right? So I feel like that's a big part of desensitization that we kind of miss out on in terms of where the dog is at that moment when they're trying to deal with that environment, that trigger. So yeah, I think you brought up two important things, and I feel like, very early on in my consulting journey as well, I was dealing with this reactive dog who was biting kids in the house, and the kids were like quite afraid of moving around the house because they'd been bitten a couple of times. And unfortunately, the situation had escalated because the dog was not actually being heard by, the professionals working with the dog previously. They were meeting the dog with, as we said, aversives, and trying to, superficially try to change the behaviors of that reactive behaviors that we talk about, right? So I think the other reason why I'm quite passionate about talking about reactive dogs is, I think when a dog is anxious or scared, I think we see it and we empathize with a dog who's scared and who's anxious, because a lot of times they cower, they're shivering, they're running away, they're freezing. You see such obvious signs of distress and discomfort around them. But a dog who's reactive, and we'll talk about this a little bit because I think we both know that it comes from very similar places, the two kind of behavior reactions. But a dog who is reacting through barking or, like, snapping, or at the end growling and biting, is so misunderstood because they're seen as aggressive or this dominant hierarchy, or, bad dogs, right? I think their distress is not seen, and people are quite indifferent to that, their distress, just because of the way they choose to respond to that trigger or the distress. I think that's another reason I feel like, it's quite sad when they're misunderstood, they're misrepresented, and then mistreated at the end of it all, right? So I feel like that's a big difference I see with dogs who might have very similar triggers, right? Like you mentioned, mutton would bark when, at certain triggers, but there are certain dogs who would just run away and then probably like hide. And a dog who's hiding probably is very well empathized with, because you see that they're scared about this trigger. But a dog like mutton would just be misunderstood as an aggressive dog and then dealt accordingly, right? So I feel like that's the other reason why I want to talk a lot more about dogs who are having these reactive behaviors.
Yeah, you've said a lot of loaded things, and I feel like each of them can be like a separate webinar, because I think like the two things that I 100% resonate with you is like reactive dogs specifically, or dogs with these kind of reactive behaviors. And I hate saying reactive dogs because I feel like it's such a label, but I also don't know what's the best way to sort of, properly like summarize what I'm talking about. But I think dogs who, show reactive behaviors, I mean, just not heard. And that is so layered, right? Like, what does it mean for a dog to not be heard? And, especially with dogs with reactive behaviors, we start seeing almost like, well, layers, right? It starts with, you know, not, it could just be, human body language off. It could be constant handling, constant touching. It could be not being heard because of, medical conditions, because of pain, right? Like, there is so much that's right there. And so I think it's interesting, um, and I suppose it makes complete sense why, for example, our approach, with dealing with dogs with reactive behaviors is actually focused on helping pet parents just listen to their dog, right? And like pick up on some of these signs and make sense of those, because ultimately you can provide solution or offer comfort only when you've heard someone out, right? And that's the case here with these dogs as well. So I feel like not being heard is such a big one. um and I think I absolutely resonate with you. I feel like when we see anxious dogs, or when we see dogs who are fearful, I think Some of them, and again, so much of reactive behaviors could also stem from fear, but they perhaps demonstrated slightly differently. Like you said, it could be fight or flight, right?
Right.
Or any fight, flight, fawn, freeze, whatever, the entire gamut of
Right.
responses. But I think with anxious or fearful dogs, and especially dogs who display behaviors like you said, of like shivering, cowering, moving away, it garners a lot more empathy, because I wonder whether at some point it also resonates with the part of us that wants to save another animal and like rescue another animal, rescue another
Right.
being. Whereas with reactive behaviors, I think we suddenly become aware that this dog is an animal, and we have to like put them in their place, whatever that place may be.
Right.
And so it feels so interesting how, like, with anxious dogs, we're likely to be more patient and empathetic, but when we look at dogs with reactivity, we want to take like a more, like, we want to take a firmer stance in how we
Right.
respond to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. True. So I think I mean, we spoke about different approaches, but I want to just get into what might be, let's say with mutton, right? Like, what was your approach? You spoke about listening to the dog,
Yeah.
but what does that look like, and what would your approach be with a dog who is exhibiting, reactive behaviors?
Yeah, I don't think my approach would be very different than yours. I feel like it comes down to like, um, I think some of the things that we already like touched upon, right? I think it's really about looking at taking a very holistic approach to trying and identifying what are different stressors and triggers for this dog, right? And there are some that will be in the external environment, and then there will be some that's very like physiological or biological to the dog. And when we talk about physiological or biological stressors, we're talking about medical conditions, we're talking about inflammation, we're talking about pain, we're talking about all of those things. So I think one is just like a holistic perspective on what is causing perhaps this reaction, or why is the dog's cup so full, right, at this point
Right.
in time. Um, and sorry, I'm deviating a little bit, because I also find like I've also found even in like consults, especially, and I think this is true with rescue dogs specifically. I think when we see dogs, who rehomed from a shelter,
Right.
who display reactive behaviors, I think there's a very strong need to justify that reactivity. To be like, like there's almost like this need to sort of try and find out what happened in the dog's past that is causing these reactive behaviors.
Right.
And I feel like sometimes you don't have an answer to that, right? Like, for
Yeah.
example, even in my case, like, I don't know why, and I still don't know what caused Mutton to have certain reactions to certain triggers or to other dogs. And
Right.
if I had to spend time decoding that why, then I would never be able to do it, right? I feel like it's also helpful to just take it as it is and say, this is the truth, this is the reality that I know of now, and how do I work with this, right? So I think,
Right.
again, taking that holistic approach to identify what could fill the cup. Um, and I think, like, just, I mean, again, there's so many details to it, and I think a lot of it sort of varies individual to individual. But I think if I had to look at foundations, I think the holistic piece, I feel like just learning how to communicate with our dogs, I think that's a big, big one.
Right.
Um, Learning how to reassure them, I think that's another big one. And I think reassurance again is such a big group of things, right? Because that's also
Yeah.
where we talk about how do we build safety, how do we build trust, how do we create a relationship and a living environment where our dogs feel safe and supported and secure, because I feel like that's so critical uh,
Yeah.
to responding to that reactivity. But yeah, like, I think a sprinkle of all of these things. What about
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a session with a client who is dealing with reactive
Mm.
issues with their dog, like just today, and I feel like, um the idea of one is giving our dogs that agency and freedom, and just space, right?
Yeah.
Like just space from this uncomfortable situation is so critical, because you mentioned, right, like there were situations when mutton was so wired up and so cup full that she just could not hear your communication, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like uh, it's so important to get our dogs to a place where they can actually listen and hear
Mm.
and process the environment that they're in. And yeah, I think that that would probably be such a critical part, and that involves all the things that you spoke about,
Yeah.
right? Which is, what are the triggers, and what could be going on currently. There is no point, as you rightly said. Of course, if we have the information, we can always add that information
Yeah.
to understanding, what trauma responses our dogs are probably having. But if you don't have it, take it from where you are today with your dog, and what's happening currently in your dog's
Mm.
environment probably that's causing them to be so wired up, so
Yeah.
cupful, like you said, right? So I think it's so critical to give them a break. I see that a lot of us keep putting our dogs repeatedly in that same place that is causing those, reactive behaviors, which is then, creating a vicious circle of, uh, us not knowing how to deal with it, and the dogs getting
Yeah.
wired up, and then constant escalation of communication by them as well. So I think a little bit of break for our dogs is such an important thing to consider, however it is possible to provide. But I also see, like, this case that I'm working on has escalated so much that people around the house, in around the dog, are now scared to move around, right? Because they feel
Mm.
like, I don't know when my dog will snap. And I feel
Yeah.
like, the people get into the situation of feeling unsafe, and then, the dogs are then robbed of their freedom to move around just because now people are scared. But then that's taking
Mm.
away the dog's freedom to
Yeah.
move around and then find safe spaces, right? So then the dog escalates the communication by, biting, and then you're in that cycle constantly and don't know where to break the cycle. Do we break it at the point of giving the dog the freedom to move around, but you put yourself under risk? Like, how do you go about it? And that's such a hard one to tackle, right? Because
Yeah.
you want to consider both, aspects. As much as we know what's going on with the dog, you also have to be mindful of what's the situation of the people around the house, and how
Yeah.
much of risk, uh, you know uh, how much of, are they at risk, right? I told you about that earlier case as well, where there were kids involved, right? So
Mm.
you want to be so careful around these kind of situations. So how do you provide safety both for the dog and the humans?
Yeah.
And I think, what are the, avenues available for them to, create this safety for each other, and then build relationship, right? Like, now you are wary of the dog is wary of you.
Yeah.
From here, how do you build that relationship as well? So I feel like this is such a tough one to start off with, because everybody is a little bit on eggshells,
Edge.
right? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So I think, you know trying to find safe spaces for the dog and the humans in the situation, and giving all of them a little bit of a break,
Yeah.
I think is a good starting point to even start wondering if your dog can actually decide, okay, instead of biting or lunging, can I walk away? uh, we are unable to have that information because everybody is so wired up
Yeah.
currently, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is the most difficult part, right? Because you need to get out of that cycle that you've gotten into currently, with you're scared of your dog is scared of you, like, you don't know where to
Yeah.
restart and rebuild from here, right? So I think that is the hardest part, but if we get through that bit, I think it becomes a little more easier over time.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely like 100% echo with you on the idea of just taking a break, right? And I'm smiling already because I used to make as to joke with Sindoor about how much she talks about it. But in our approach, we do actively recommend
Yeah.
clients to take a break, right, from some of these situations. And we know that it's a legit process called active avoidance,
Yeah.
and it's there exactly for the purpose that you mentioned, which is just take a break, right? Allow everybody to just breathe a little bit and relax. And I think that serves so much benefit to both the dog as well as the pet parent.
Yeah.
Because I think that, like, and again, this is a conversation that I keep having with the clients that I work with who have dogs who display reactive behaviors, which is, if you are worked up in a situation, your dog is going to be worked up in a situation. And if your dog is worked up in a situation, you're going to be worked up in that situation, right? And it is that loop that we get into. And like you said, we have to break that somewhere, right? And so putting yourself and your dog out of that situation for some time can give much needed peace and composure, and just a chance for everybody to just decompress, which I think is so 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 important.
Yeah.
um, and I find that, like, again, in for a lot of people, when we talk about this break, when we talk about actively avoiding a certain situation, a certain environment for their dogs and themselves, they find it really hard to wrap their heads around, because so many of those situations have been normed as essential for your dog's well-being, you know
Yeah.
um, and they're just like, but wait, isn't this like important for my dog? And then we're like, no, it's not. You can let go of it, right? And I
Yeah.
think that process to also try and learn from that takes such a while.
Yeah.
um, but again, I mean, it happens, right? We see change at the end of that, and we see a difference at the end of that. And in
Yeah.
fact, just today, a client and messaged messaged me saying that there was a certain outdoor environment where her dog was extensively getting triggered, and she has been trying to avoid that and minimize that space for the last 3 months. And today she went back into that space, and no reaction whatsoever, right? And I mean, I resonate with that, because for some of us it takes 3 months, which for some feel very long. And for
Yeah.
some of us, like in my case with Mutton, I think it took anywhere between like a year and a half to 2 years for me to
Yeah.
go back into a space where she could, from a distance, see a dog and not have a reaction.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, like, that's also the other thing that comes into our approach, which is, this is not something that is a quick fix. This is a process that requires patience, right? Because we're learning how to listen to our dogs, we're learning how to rebuild a relationship with them, that's
Yeah.
based on communication and respect, and relationships take time to build. So I
Yeah.
feel like that is also a critical part of the approach.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I think it's also important to call out is it's not like we're talking about curing reactivity,
Yeah.
right? Uh, I think a lot of people come in with this expectation with certain behaviors that they're finding it difficult to manage. Is that, I'm here and I want to get to here, which is, calm dog, none of these behaviors that I'm finding it difficult. And I think how many of us stop having behaviors that are so called problematic, right? Like, don't we get angry? Don't we get
Yeah.
overwhelmed? Don't we get, you know, asocial, when
Yeah, or
social
don't we just
environment.
fall into like default patterns,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah,
And be dysregulated, go into like, coping behaviors, coping
yeah,
mechanisms. I think from the time when Sammy passed, I think I'm in this coping zone where I'm just distracted, like distracting myself, and keeping myself like not having to be, in the present and actually go through the motions of the present. And that's a coping behavior. How many of us actually get out of these patterns, just because life happens, just because
yeah,
something happens and something triggers, right? So I think it's a very uh, unfair expectation to have that your dog will go from these behaviors to no behaviors. And this is how, then your dog will be like, in the best place possible. I think a lot of this has to do with, like, even me, like, having done my, emotional journey for the last
Mm,
3-5 years. I know that I'm getting into my, patterns. But maybe the difference is today I can recognize, okay, I'm getting into these patterns because of
yeah,
certain reasons, right? I
yeah,
think that's the difference between maybe past and today, present. And I
yeah,
think that itself is a healing journey, right? And I
yeah,
think we need to look at our approach towards dogs with any kind of behaviors for that matter, but even this specifically, is that it's a healing journey with our dogs, right? And
yeah,
some days are bad days, some days are good days,
yeah,
some days you're just surprised by your dog's reactions, and
yeah,
some days you are like, this is the bare minimum I can do today, right? And I think it's important to also accept that you can't create this model dog, and I think it's very unfair to have a model dog in mind, that you need to fit your dog into this
yeah,
ideal dog. So I think it's also not so much about curing reactivity, right? It's so much about allowing your dog to heal from whatever trauma or
yeah.
trigger or discomfort that they seem to have around these
Yeah.
triggers, and show up for them in whatever manner they need us in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, if I could like thump my hand on the table, then that's what I would be doing as you were talking. Because, yes, absolutely. I mean, I have started like talking about mutton, and perhaps this language will also change over a period of time. But as when I talk about her now, I refer to her as a formally reactive dog. And I say that not because her reactivity is fixed or cured, but because I think my understanding of her reactivity has shifted.
Right.
So it's like you said, I think there are some days that are great, and then there are some days that aren't. She goes back into default patterns, but now I'm also, I think the awareness that you spoke of in that healing journey is, I think the awareness for me is to say, hey, maybe your cup is full, maybe you dysregulated in this moment. um,
Right.
and so how do we decompress, and how do we find regulation, and how do we find calmness so that we can continue to focus on that emotional well-being.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's, for me, I don't think the conversation, especially with mutton, is any more about reactive versus non-reactive. I feel like it's just it's good days and bad days. And I see this happen so much with clients, like when especially they're sharing like progress, oh, my dog was able to do this, but they still had a reaction to this. We're a work in progress.
Right.
I'm like, it's okay, right? Like you said, there is no model dog, there is no perfect dog. uh,
Right.
and I think it's okay to have both paths, right? I think where it becomes important is, I think, to the previous examples that you said, is where we start looking at safety, right, for both the dog as well as people around, and that becomes priority, where perhaps we need to very systematically see progress happen, because again, that's safety in question.
Yeah.
um, but otherwise, I feel like it's just about shifting our perspective and expectation of just overall behaviors in our dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as absolutely, with I think with progress, the only thing that I would keep in mind when we have bad days also is just ensure everyone's safe in
Yeah.
that moment, right? And everything else is, work in progress, as you said. But then just that safety is something that you want to ensure for everyone in that situation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that would be priority, even on bad days. And I think what you said about, it's not about curing reactive versus non-reactive, is I think exactly the reason why I think we have named our program
Mm.
as care for your reactive dog
Yeah.
than, whatever else that you could think of,
Reactivity solved 101 instead of that.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
think I felt like caring for your dog,
Yeah.
whatever behaviors that they might have, is so important, because at the end of it, good day, bad day, trigger, no trigger, regulated, dysregulated. I think what matters the most is that we are able to show up for them and care for them in the way they need us at that point. And I think the name kind of justifies the approach. So would you want to talk about the program a little bit in terms of what we want to talk about? Why are we offering this program? I think why we are offering this program is quite
Yeah.
uh, obvious by this time, but
Yeah.
yeah, you want to share some things?
Yeah, I can start by like the why. Like, if I had to put like a really fancy mission statement to the program, it's just like change mindsets, around reactive dogs. But yeah, I think the again, pretty much quite obviously, the program is aimed towards pet parents who are struggling with their dog's reactive behaviors. And the idea of the program is to sort of, really offer tailored support through this journey, right? And so it's a 3 month program. Pet parents sign up for it. They get access to one-on-one sessions with both of us. We're both running 4 slots each, so you get, both of us as a primary consultant for your case. And so you sign up for one-on-one sessions. You get group sessions where all of us come together. You get to meet fellow pet parents who are in a similar journey like yours. You get access to lots of content, lots of resources, lots of support. We do the private WhatsApp group. We give you, support in the form of consultations post the program. And again, I think the objective of the program, very much like Sowjanya mentioned, really is not so much about fixing the reactivity, but it's, I think, to give the language and the support and tools per se to start that journey of understanding each individual dog and learning how to care for them. Right? I feel like that's the critical piece of it. Yeah. Do you want to share more details on the program?
I think you kind of uh, said quite a bit of what it entails, and I think it's a it's a good timeline to have a 3 month program, because I feel like
Yeah.
we can start off the decompression process we spoke about
Yeah.
for the dogs and the humans, right? And I think depending on cases, it takes a while for the decompression to happen, and then to start seeing our dogs to like actually able to process the environment in difficult situations than actually jumping from like 0 to 1, right? And I think this is a good time to facilitate that decompression, and I think that's the hardest space, right? Because as you
Yeah.
said, they need to avoid probably certain situations, and that becomes, there's a bit of a inertia towards avoiding situations, because either they're told, as you said, right, like this is what your dog needs, or
Yeah.
there's an inherent understanding that if you avoid situations, how are you going to learn to respond to it
Yeah.
better, right? So I think this is a good time that we can do a little bit of hand holding with the dog parents during this period, and then give them the right kind of support when they need this. And of course, we are going to be available post the program if at all they
Yeah.
need us after that as well. And Surabhi has a support group for reactive dog parents dealing with reactive dogs, and I think you will have access to that group as well. So I think it's a good environment and
Yeah.
support system to have be a part of. So I
Yeah.
think that was one thing. And I think with two of us, I think we can also start talking about reassurance and relationship building, which is also the other most critical part of dealing with reactive dogs. Just because, as I mentioned, that case that I'm currently working on, where you get into the cycle of not having the right relationship with your dog and good relationship with your dog, and unable to show up for them, unable to listen to them. And I think building that relationship also
Yeah.
is so important and key to this whole approach. So I think these two, like, if we can end the program with dog parents feeling like, yes, I was able to facilitate some amount of decompression for my dog, and I could start my journey of
Yeah.
building a safe relationship with my dog, I think we've achieved what we wanted to achieve with the program, if at all, we are able to hear this from the dog parents who are part of the program. So I think that would definitely be, the goal of the program, so to say,
Yeah.
in terms of, not
Yeah.
so much to cure your dog, but really like, look at
Yeah.
starting that journey of, helping your dog move through these difficult situations. So, yeah, I think that's about what I wanted to add for the program. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that
So,
you?
Sauj, do you also want to like share a little bit about like, I mean, given that both of us also do like behavior consultations, right? Like,
Right.
what would, why would, let's say, a pet parent want to sign up for a program versus a consultation? Like, what are the pros of that?
Yeah.
Suppose, yeah.
Yeah. So I think with the program, what we're able to do, one is the two of us are able to also create these group sessions and this kind of a space where there are fellow dog parents having similar situations, so we can actually talk in our group sessions in our WhatsApp group, which is not obviously available in a one-on-one consultation, right? So it's
Yeah.
just me and the client. The other is I feel, and since I started the Anxious Dog program also, I feel like I'm able to very structurally monitor what they're able to
Mm.
do and not able to do in this period of 3 months, right? And
Yeah.
I think that is so critical in the initial period, because some things that we speak about may not be something that our clients are able to actually translate into practically, applying, right?
Mm.
And there might be some challenges. And through the program, because you have signed up for the program, I feel like you are also in touch with the professional, on a regular basis of what's going on with the dog, right?
Yeah.
And by allowing for group sessions and allowing for one-on-one sessions, we are also focusing on what the entire group needs, but also what you specifically need for your dog, and keep monitoring these things, right? And I do go a little more advanced in the program of what I expect of the clients in the program,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sure we
Yeah.
both are going to be asking them to observe and, record and monitor a lot more mindfully
Yeah.
than, with clients with whom we are working one on one, because we don't know how much that one on one, space is allowing them to, have that advanced level of monitoring for their dog, right? So with the
Sure.
program, you're invested for this long term period of 3 months, and that's going to be intensive,
Yeah.
program. So I feel like the intensity of the program is a lot more advanced than just having the one-on-one consultation. And a lot of clients, if we both have any existing client who does want to, sign up for the program, I think we are open to having our clients sign up as well, for
Yeah.
the program. So there is a discount for existing clients, so you can,
Yeah.
reach out to both of us, and then have that conversation. Do you think there's any other, advantage of signing up for the program?
I mean, no, I think just building off of what you said, I feel like because it's a 3 months program and we're committed to the individual spaces as well as the group spaces, I do feel like there's a lot more mutual accountability, which I think is a great space to be in.
Yeah.
Accountability can seem like a scary word, but it's just really helpful, right? And I think it, especially for pet parents who are in that place and in that journey where they do really want to start that kind of work with their dog.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's really helpful. And I think the second one, which again for me has been like a big learning from the reactive dog parent support group, I think is just the power of community, right? I
Yeah.
think, and just the importance of that to, I think so many of us, because we're, obviously we're in our own lives and in our on our own tracks, I think we can feel very isolated and feel like what we're going through only we're going through and nobody else understands. And then when we become part of a community, we realize that there is just so much more support and kindness and empathy that exists.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so powerful, and that's such an important part of that healing process, because I think, again, the program, as much as it is about caring for, you know the reactive dog, it's also caring for the pet parent who has a reactive dog, right? And I think like community does that so well. So I feel like that's definitely like a big advantage.
Yeah, I think community, we undervalue community so much these days, I think. And, especially post-pandemic, I think we are all deprived of,
Yeah,
a community to lean on. But with dog parents, and then dog parents choosing to be gentle and empathetic with their dogs, and then, you can feel so isolated in this entire journey, because one is you're not doing what popularly is told for you, that you need to do with your reactive dog, but then also you don't feel that it's the right thing to do with your dog,
yeah,
and you don't have anyone who can understand you. So I think community is
yeah,
so critical in such a situation, plus having professionals guiding you while you're in a community. So it's not just sounding off of other dog parents, but there are also the two of us helping
yeah,
and hearing people out, and then
yeah.
reassuring. I feel like a lot of my clients, I have felt, come to me not for suggestions and recommendations, but for reassurance, right? Like to
Mm,
tell them that, it's okay if you don't do this, or it's okay if you're feeling like
yeah,
this, or it's okay if you're here, you'll always get to a better place in the future. Like, they really
yeah,
want to hear it's okay from somebody who is certified to tell you that it's okay.
yeah,
And I think that's also quite valuable in my opinion, and I feel like a lot of my clients only come into the session just to hear this, right? Like, it's not
yeah,
about suggestions or recommendations, it's just to tell them that it's okay if you're feeling like this. And that's such a important thing, right? Like, and
yeah,
that's what we talk about, reassurance, and we talk about that with dogs as well
yeah,
during our program, but it's such a critical part. So yeah, community is such a big part, and that's why I think we wanted to do it as batches and in groups, because you can have a lot of people
yeah,
just listening to your concerns, but also telling you that you're not alone in this
yeah,
journey. I think
for
that's
sure.
that's obviously very important. uh, I think we want to also state that we are starting the batch on October 25th, and it's
Yep,
a 3-month program.
yep,
So yeah, if you are interested in signing up for the program, you can DM me, if you want to work with me. If you even DM Surabhi if you want to work with her, we can, like, sign you up, onboard you, and everything, and
yeah,
we can help you with any other questions that you might have on this, or in general, if you have any questions on your reactivity in your dog, or reactive behavior, so just any behavior with your dogs, just ping either of us, and we're here to,
yeah,
like, chat with you about it.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, I thought of a third advantage also.
Which is,
Yeah, which is the fact that like in group spaces, like, but also I think group spaces, but also offline because of the two of us, like, you do get access to you get access to two consultant styles, right? Which I think is a
yeah,
great space.
yeah,
Because again, while I'm sure that you and I have a lot of alignment and overlap in that alignment, I'm sure your style, uh, there will be differences in each of our styles as well, right? And I think
yeah,
that even that diversity can be really helpful, because I think both of us will then pick out also different things when we're in those spaces.
yeah,
So again, I think that could potentially offer like a really wholesome perspective.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think there was one case we worked together as consultants, and I saw how starkly we are
Wait,
different
what?
in.
Which case?
Oh, I tell you offline. We worked only
Okay.
one. You
Oh,
you forgot.
recently. Recently.
Yeah, after Sammy
Okay.
passed. You
Okay. Yeah.
forgot?
Now, no, no. Now I know.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I think the person's watching also, because the person texted on the side. So I think the
yeah,
person's watching also.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think we were quite different in our,
What we were picking out.
what
Yeah.
we were picking
Yeah.
out, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's so important. It's great for the people as well,
Yeah.
because they're getting two different. Like, we both have same approach, but we have different
Yeah.
strengths, right? And I think they're
Yeah.
getting both our strengths together
Yeah.
in the
For
program as
sure.
well,
100%.
which is so amazing to have. And another eye, right? Like,
Mm.
when I do end up having difficult cases, and I always tend to go to Sindoor, and I'm like, do you see this? And I'm struggling here. What do you think about it?
Yeah.
But here, with two of us, we both can bring in our perspectives of what we
For
think
sure.
maybe the other one is missing, and have that conversation, or
Yeah.
I think and because we are both aware of everybody in the group also, I think we can always have those conversations. So I
Yeah.
think that's a great added value and a great point that you mentioned and
Yeah,
thought.
of course. Yeah. Look
Yeah,
at us,
yeah,
conveniently forgetting about ourselves in the process. Yeah.
yeah. So much for advocating for self-care and self, like whatever.
Yeah.
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 So I think not bad. We have stuck to our timings.
Yeah. I saw you make
Yeah.
a very valiant effort at cutting short conversations and moving from one prompt to the other. I could see
Yeah,
it on your
because
face.
it's not the two of us. If this is two of us just in the background, we have had a very bad track record of that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So
Um,
I think we can end the stream and then
yeah.
we
Do you want to
can
pause
catch
for
up.
any questions if in case people are
If there's
around?
anyone,
Yeah,
yeah, I
any
think there are a
comments
couple.
or yeah.
Kritika was online. Hi, Kritika. Barrington Bucks and Behavior LLC. I think this is
Yeah.
Monica.
Okay.
So, hi, Monica. This was
We
very
have
early on in the
yeah. Yeah, maybe they
such
just
bad
dropped off.
host.
Yeah. They realized that this was just like a
Yeah,
conversation amongst the two of them that they've decided to
yeah,
put live.
yeah.
Um,
But of course, people can drop in any comments
yeah,
that they might have when they're watching it later as well. And then we
yeah,
can obviously come back and then answer. Or you can reach out to either of us on
yeah,
Facebook, Instagram, and then we can have a chat there as well.
yeah.
So I think I can end the live stream now.
Awesome.
Have a good evening, a good night, good day, depending on where you're watching us
Yeah.
from.
Thank you so
And
much for tuning
yeah,
in.
tuning in. Yeah, this
Yeah.
feels so formal. So I'm just going to end the live stream now.
Yeah.